This story speaks to the heart of every fly fisherman. What I didn't understand back then was that it's never really about bragging rights, the stories full of bravado, or the bitterness that can come after. It's about that one perfect, electrifying moment, the instant your heart stops, the water erupts, and you're suddenly connected to a living titan. And in that split second, you realize this fish isn't just fighting, he's declaring war. We'll see who wins this battle. I am the king. No one can take that from me. Not the fish. Not the doubters. That 20-minute fight, surging adrenaline, chaos, raw power, still plays in my mind like a film in slow motion. Every splash, every heartbeat, every second is crystal clear, like the water that day and the sunlight when I met the king. I used to think fishing was about proof, photos, weight, records. But now, decades later, I know better. The real trophy wasn't what I caught. It was what I kept. A memory I would never trade, not for any official record or recognition. Long live the king. It has been 41 years now, and it's still hard for me to believe what I witnessed and what happened that extraordinary day. It was Wednesday, September 26th, 1984, and I was standing in a salmon river. As it started to get light, through the mist that hung over the water, you could hear and then see them coming, like an infantry, wave after wave of salmon in wild flight coming right at me. It reminded me of the war movies when the enemy attacked at dawn and charged with everything they had. They looked like self-guided, heat-seeking silver torpedoes, bouncing off rocks and exploding all around me. If you've ever witnessed this, you won't be fishing at the time because you find yourself scrambling to get out of the way of these lovesick maniacs. Within an hour and a half, everything then came to a sudden eerie stillness, and the fish were gone. I found myself completely alone on the river. Then the sun started to peek over the treetops and hit sections of the river. Within seconds, the pre-dawn assault army retreated in my direction. This time they had the current momentum at their backs and fear in their eyes instead of other salmon. After watching a dangerously excited fish launch itself completely out of the water, and soar 15 feet onto the shore. I remember thinking, what a bizarre thing, these crazy fish. I'm used to trying to spot a dimple on the surface to locate a raising fish 100 yards away, and instead, I'm dodging suicide projectile fish missiles. I wondered if anyone ever got bit to death. I also wondered what the fish thought as they flew by my rock and looked up. Look at the coward on the rock. Earlier that morning, it was pouring down rain and unseasonably cold when the alarm went off at 4 a.m. I was dead tired, having fished 5 consecutive days, and I asked myself, catch fish or more sleep? As I started to doze off, I remembered a conversation I had with an old-timer about my dream of catching a record-sized fish someday. He said, catching a record-sized fish is most every fisherman's dream. However, it remains a dream if you don't keep your line in the water. The old-timer's words once again tricked me into getting up and thinking, today could be that day. I was sure that I had just witnessed the most spectacular thing I had ever seen in my life when I caught a brief glimpse of what I thought was an extremely large, broad-backed fish coming up over a set of rapids only 30 yards downstream. I froze and waited, knowing the fish would not get by me without me seeing him. Then my worst fear happened. The large fish went back down over the falls, and I was sure he was gone. I was breathless and paralyzed with excitement in 1 second and completely devastated the next. I was shaking, a feeling that happens a lot if you fish long enough. I was so disappointed, I turned to step down off my rock to head back to the bank and leave. There, right behind me, only 20 feet away, lying in crystal clear water with the sun lighting his enormous body length, was the most magnificent king salmon I had ever seen. The old-timer was right, I thought. However, in all the excitement, not only did I not catch a fish yet, I hadn't even put my line in the water. Without taking my eyes off the fish, I checked my line and my fly. I managed to keep myself calm by thinking, this is the day, this is the moment. Focus. If I guessed the wrong distance and the drift for the presentation, I knew no one would believe that a fish this big existed, and my dream would vanish just like the fish had me believing earlier. I was also sure the fish wasn't going to hold but few seconds, so it was going to have to be one perfect cast. The rest of what happened seemed like a time stood still. I took my eyes off the fish only a split second to scan the river for other fishermen this fish might attract. Now all I needed was 2 things to happen: the most perfect, important cast of my life, and for my pencil, thin 9-weight fly rod to stop this river whale from dragging me back to Lake Ontario. 2 very nervous and ugly false casts later, and the fly was in the water. This was it. The fly was not sinking fast enough. I started to panic and knew it would spook the fish if it floated over his head. I had to risk everything to pull it back. It worked. He held. With one more corrective false cast, the fly was drifting in a perfect path towards the fish. My heart stopped when I realized the fly disappeared, and my line came to a stop in the drift. Bottom, I thought. In an instant it was obvious. The king and I were now connected by a mere 20-pound test leader and survival of the fittest. The fish exploded, leaping and thrashing its massive body with such force it created a cannonball sound and splash that I'll never forget. He went straight for the falls and pulled so hard on my rod, it felt like I just hooked a cement truck. I remember thinking, this fish thinks he's caught me, and he's going to drag me along the rocks until I give up. Only one thing to do when he hits the rapids. Run, and keep running before I'm out of backing. I seriously don't remember my feet even on the ground. I flew over rocks and through deep pools of water. I fell twice and lost my hat, my lunch, my glasses, and a lot gear from my vest. I spotted some shallow water at the end of the 200-yard run, which I somehow managed to sway in his direction. He went for it. What a lucky break. After 20 minutes of applying every last fishing skill I had, a quarter-mile downstream, and the fish was beached and laying at my feet. Now out of the water, I was shocked when I realized his overall size. Truly a trophy of a lifetime, maybe even a record. This was indeed the day, I whispered as if only the fish would hear it. Instead of a day of grand celebration, what happened next was the beginning of nightmare. A crazy and bizarre set of circumstances that still haunts me 41 years later. Two guys I'd seen early guiding some fishermen came out of nowhere and surprised me. The tall guy, Dick, said, "Wow, what a fish. I've got a camera. I'll take your picture." His partner Freddie quickly accessed the fish and said, "Mid-40s, but it's not a record." Since I was a Pennsylvania-raised fly fisherman and trophies were measured by inches and ounces, I figured they were experts and they would know if it was a trophy big enough to claim a record. Dick took what would later be the only other picture taken of the fish. I then went to a tackle store to get it weighed. The store had an old feed mill scale set up for guys to weigh fish and get their pictures taken. A guy I knew, I'll refer to as Mr. B, was minding the store and brought out a Polaroid camera and took a picture of me holding the giant. We knew the scales weren't dead accurate. However, he topped the scales between 52 to 53 pounds. Mr. B was pretty excited by now and decided we had to get the fish to a certified scale before it dried out. For whatever reason, I was still in the mindset. It's a big fish, but not a record. I was trying to convince myself it was nothing to get excited about. One of my friends was sure the record at that time was 44 pounds. The current record is 47 pounds. It was then that I got more nervous than when I first saw the fish. We all hurried back to the store to get the fish weighed. When we got there, we learned that Mr. B had already taken the fish to get it weighed, and according to a message he left at the store, the fish officially weighed 52 pounds, 4 ounces. It measured a whopping 51 inches long and had a 31-inch girth. Did I just catch the record fish? No way. Mr. B said he already had a guy offer to mount the fish free if I would display it in the store for a while. I agreed, and by now my head was spinning and I was delirious with excitement. I asked where the fish was, and he said, "It's safe in the taxidermist freezer." A week had gone by, and I drove back up to Pulaski to see Mr. B and see what was up with the fish. I was glad to see him, and immediately I could see by his face something was wrong. Then he said it. "The fish is gone." Then it started to sink in, and I sensed that he was serious. My shock immediately turned to suspicion when I found it odd that he had not offered any apology, explanation, or regrets. "The fish is gone." I then became speechless in the middle of a sentence and turned and got in my car, drove 4 hours straight without eating all day. I was devastated and so embarrassed for all the bragging I had done that week. Months soon turned to years of asking people if they knew anything about the fish. I would tell my story to anyone who would listen in hopes of finding the fish. 2 separate people told me they had heard about the fish and that it was hanging in the Thousand Island bait store going into Canada, but most people thought it sounded a lot like a familiar fish tale that always ends with, "You should have seen the one that got away." I sent my story to several outdoor magazines, since I had read articles of people who have had their stories published and later recovered their trophies. Not a single response. I stopped talking about the fish. I gave it up, but it caused me a lot of sleepless nights. After nearly 14 years, my friend Nick and I were in Pulaski buying a fishing license, and on the counter was a brochure for one of the local outfitters that caught my attention. I picked up the brochure of a guy holding up a fish and thought, that's got to be a record. And then I said to my friend, look at the size of the fish this guy is holding. It was then that I finally scanned the picture closer to look at the guy holding the fish. There was a young-looking kid who looked a lot like me. It's me, I said in total shock. I had completely forgotten that day the two guides took a picture, and obviously I had never seen the picture. Of course, I grabbed the entire rack of brochures, since I only had one picture of the fish, and headed to the phone to call the outfitter. After years of lost hope, it felt so good to talk to someone who believed me for a change. They remembered the day and the fish, but still didn't believe the wait, and that it could have been a record. Even with them, I had no bragging rights, no fish, and no way of proving it was nothing more than a fish tail. I became bitter about the entire incident, and I took the only blow-up picture I had made from the faded Polaroid and put it away because I couldn't bear to look at it anymore. Another 6 years passed when I recently was admiring some salmon mounts that a taxidermist had done from upstate New York, which somehow lead to a conversation about a very large fish that was caught and never found. I expected him to give me that same doubtful look, which then would remind me how no one ever believes me and I embarrass myself again. Instead, this bizarre story took another turn. Vince Voles, the taxidermist, had a working ongoing relationship with Game Commission and had some background experience with fish biology specialist. More importantly, he had heard enough false tales and stories to believe me and understand how important a once-in-a-lifetime mount meant to its owner. He wanted to help me and had a great idea that I would have never considered. He suggested recreating the fish since all his mounts are done that way. We quickly worked together to send pictures and analyze and compare proportions and scale to my body size. It was right around the holiday when I got a call from Vince on my cell phone. He said, I just spoke to the fish specialist. He went on to say, a fish measuring 51 inches of length would have a 30 to 32 inch girth and weigh approximately 53 pounds. This confirmed the unofficial weight and size to be extremely close to the measurements made years ago. I'm not sure who was more excited between us. I would hold my trophy up for the first time in 20 years. I would hold again the amazing fish that got away, and finally put to rest my hopeless story from that memorable day on the Salmon River. After years of people questioning my character, instead of respecting this amazing king, I realized no once could take my memory and that I wouldn't trade for anything. I will never hold the record, but I will hold my incredible fish up high with great pride and think of my friend the old timer, never having seen the trophy fish that he inspired me to catch that day. Only a few who saw the fish believe I hooked the biggest salmon that the river's ever seen. Only I know the truth and the way it crashed through the rapids, and how I fought the king like my life depended on it, every run, every surge, pulling me deeper in the river's rhythm. At last it broke, rolling into the shallows, gleaming like a piece of precious silver. But no one was there that could tell the part that matters. Only the river holds my story in whispers. The act of fly fishing allows you to become fully immersed and lose oneself in the experience. The river flows through time, fleeting like my own life. Long live the king of the Salmon River.